All right, welcome back to the Dallas Fort Worth Entrepreneur Mastermind Podcast. Today we have Joshua Moore. Joshua,
either one works.
Okay. Owner and coffee extraordinaire of Inclusion Coffee. Recently opened amidst a pandemic in Arlington, Texas, in downtown.
Yep, downtown Arlington, right by UTA. This is my little plug.
Yep.
Right by UTA, across from City Hall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my wife and I, a little backstory on how Josh and I met. We work out of coffee shops probably 2 to 4 days a week. Well, now exclusively at Inclusion, but before it was like various places. And when we saw the Inclusion opening up in one of these new buildings in downtown Arlington, we were stoked. We were like, oh, finally a place that is hopefully better than every other place around here. It was bigger. And we walked in, and the first time we went there, we ordered a coffee. And we were going to order a coffee. We walked up and there's like how old is she? She's like 8-year-old girl.
At the time, she's 7.
Yeah, like a 7-year-old girl behind the counter. And I was like, this might not go well.
And no one else in sight.
Yeah, just no one else there. And I was like, started trying to order a drink from her. And she was like looking at me like I was stupid. Like, I'm a kid. That's what she was saying to me with her eyes. And I was like, but you're there. I don't know. And then Josh comes around the corner. But it's your daughter-in-law now?
Yeah.
Stepdaughter. Sorry.
She... It's really funny because I've told that story from my perspective a couple times because it was really funny to me and stuck out, and not realizing it was you until just the other day when I started telling it to you and you were like, that was me. And I was like, I think I was like, wait, was that you? Because I was kind of remembering. And anyway, I was around the corner like putting furniture together because I think it was like day one.
Yeah, I mean, there was like 6.5 chairs in there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she was running that counter and does not... For months, she didn't let anyone else take orders. It was during her summer. And then I think she wasn't in school because of COVID. But, and she wanted to work that counter, and she did a great job. I mean, because she was only 7, she might have been 8. But because she was so young, it was almost the more rude she was, because being a kid, it's like cute. And so we'd get better tips. I always tell the employees, like, you guys got to better thank Brielle for taking those orders because you guys are getting paid more because of it.
And that doesn't really go away, honestly. Like, one of the things that I recognized in upscale, like fine dining, was it's very true. Sort of the more rude and straightforward you are with people, they love it. I don't know why. It's like sadistic, but
it doesn't really work for me. maybe it's a gift that certain people have. I don't have that gift. I have to be nice.
Well, maybe it's too obvious. You have such kind eyes that if you're being rude to someone, they're like, oh, he really doesn't like me. This isn't a game.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
So anyways, we after the first time we were there, Alyssa and I were just like, this is brutal. I mean, this is tough to open up a new concept, right? I mean, you've been working in coffee shops forever, but opening up a new concept in a new building, an empty building at the time, right? Yep. There wasn't really even...
I think they had leased some, but we were the second or third business to go into that building. Now there's a few more opening up, but yeah.
So, yeah, we were just like, all right, we'll settle down here. I mean, this is somebody we want to support, and we want to see this business thrive. But enough about me. So tell me a little bit about how you got into coffee, how you got here today, how you like being a business owner, all that.
I got into coffee originally because I got fired at my job. They did offer me that job, just disclaimer. They offered me the job back once they realized why I was fired, which I'm not going to tell that story. But and so I just was, you know what? I'm going to use this as an opportunity to write a book, and a great job to have while writing a book is a coffee shop. And that's what I tell a lot of people. Coffee shop job is a great stepping stone into something else, a dream that you have. It's a great job for that kind of mindset, unless, of course, you want to be a coffee shop owner someday. And so I got a job just like anybody else, working the counter at a coffee shop. I didn't even really love coffee at the time. I loved the coffee space and the vibe and the community, but wasn't a huge coffee drinker.
What's the year?
Oh, I want to say like 2008, maybe 2009, something like that.
Yeah, so like the coffee shop scene wasn't new, but it was still like cool. Yeah. I mean, it's still cool, but like extra cool at the time.
It was just coming in. Like Starbucks was really big, and the phase between independent coffee shops being almost impossible to keep open, they were failing at a huge rate. That transition from coffee shops actually succeeding at a pretty good rate was kind of halfway there. Now coffee shops succeed, almost as well as any brick and mortar business.
Yeah, you said it's like inverse now, right?
Yeah, it's inverse. It used to be like 5% of them would make it, and now it's more like 90% of them make it. And this is like in a 2-year span. Anyway, and I loved it. I fell in love with coffee because it was my first time to experience like locally roasted, fresh coffee. I'd only experienced like Folgers that my grandpa would brew, a gallon of every day. And
my brother still drinks that. And we're about to go back to Wisconsin. I'm already like game planning how I'm going to dodge that bullet every morning.
Oh yeah, man.
I will say, sometimes that stuff works. The Folgers coffee stuff.
Just double.
I accidentally cut to myself in the first 2 minutes of the video, so I might as well introduce myself now.
Oh yeah,
people are gonna see me and be like, "Who is this rando who's just like sitting here?"
Yeah, I forget. So Alex is now on camera and with a microphone. He's always been behind the camera before. So
Howdy.
Alex Produces, man extraordinaire and owner of this beautiful space that he just created.
Yes, and I will say real quick, this is an empty canvas on which we will be painting a set on as these shows develop,
Which will be beyond your wildest dreams. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have some pretty wild dreams.
Okay, well, maybe not your dreams. I meant Alex.
Anyways, continue. Yeah. Now we're good.
Okay, so yeah, Folgers is crap. You got some good coffee.
Yeah. Anyway, I started to fall in love with coffee, the vibe, and I became really observant about the owner and how he ran things. And I've always cared more about what am I going to learn at this job than how much I got paid. And so I pretty much made it known to him, like, hey, I'm here to learn. I want more responsibility as soon as you think I'm ready. And he kind of took that to heart. And he didn't pay me hardly anything for more responsibility.
I was going to say, that's usually taken advantage of to a degree as well.
And at least at first, I had to prove myself, and that makes sense to me, especially from sitting where I am today as an owner. If you're going to get a responsibility that you're untested in, you need to prove yourself in it. And slowly but surely, he would give me a little bit more responsibility, a little bit more. Like, it started out just, I'm the guy that goes and buys the milk,
Booyah.
Lots of really interesting stories of what I would tell people when they would ask me, why are you buying so much milk? I had so many funny answers.
And now you got a milk guy.
Yep, and now I got a milk guy. And then, then I got to make the schedule. I mean, I got promoted to shift leader first, and it was just pretty much I started to think about try to run things the way he wanted them run. And I was always observing what was the thing that was bothering him the most this week about, what's going on
What's
here.
the problem to solve?
Yeah, and I was always trying to solve it. Until one day he came to me and he said, Josh, you're the only one who, whenever I'm not at the coffee shop and I know you're working, that I don't worry about it. It doesn't matter who else is working. I don't know why. Other people do a great job too, but I just don't worry when you're there. And I was, huge compliment, and I don't know that it was completely deserved, but because there are things that I'm sure he doesn't know about that happened that I took care of, and sometimes not as successfully as I would have liked. But long story short, I just learned, and eventually I got promoted to being the general manager. I helped open some more locations, or another location in an offsite roastery, and I mean I did everything from the plumbing, occasionally some electrical work, roasting the coffee, some baking if it was needed, and then of course making the coffee. And I just got the opportunity to kind of get my hands dirty with everything.
Right. Yeah.
Literally, I remember once my entire arm was inside of a grease trap, unclogging it, and didn't know how to do that. Google is a great tool, or YouTube. Sorry, Google and YouTube. Anyway, eventually, I just kind of realized this job has become easy. When it came time for me to get a raise, I went to the owner and I said, hey, how about instead of giving me a raise, we hire an assistant? Wow. So I passed up my raise, took that money and used it towards having an assistant until once I had an assistant at both locations, I was like, man, this job is easy. And
what year is this? You're like 2010?
Probably 2012, 13, I'd say. Okay. I was there for at least 5 years, maybe 6 years.
And is this in Dallas?
This is so the company is called Buongiorno Coffee.
Okay.
And the owner is called is David, and David Clark, and he taught me so much and gave me the opportunity to learn. And I learned. I like to tell people when they come and work for me, if I know they have a mindset to learn and open a business one day, I was like, you're going to learn things here that you want to emulate, and you're going to learn things that you want to do different. because you see me doing it one way and you're like, I don't like that. You're going to learn that and have the opportunity to learn that. I was the same way. I got to learn things that I know that I'm going to want to do that differently and things that I want to emulate.
Oh, yeah.
And a big thing that I learned from David is just the importance of community and how to foster community and relationships, especially in the company with customers. That was his unique talent that truly made his coffee shop different. And I'm saying different amongst coffee shops that are already good at community. That's like kind of a given, but maybe I'm a little biased, but I just felt like Buongiorno is the name of the coffee shop, that it was special in that way.
And him having a good manager in place allowed him to do more of that, right? He wasn't so worried about the day-to-day operations. He could be out in the community more.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I feel that same way. The less I have to worry about in the day-to-day fixing problems, the more I'm able to help the company and to spend time talking with people. Like yesterday, I got to talk with somebody for 4 hours, just kind of out of the blue. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I was there making the coffee every day. That would be a lot harder. I'd have too much.
Yeah, you weren't checking your watch the whole time. I got something else to get to.
Yeah, I mean, there's always more to work on, but I had that freedom. I have that freedom and flexibility to give someone time if they need it, and it's a great joy for me to be able to do that. Anyway, as I was coming out of close there, I decided that I needed to leave, and I pretty much just told him, I had a meeting. I said, I don't know when, but I know I'm going to be working on transitioning out. So I started working on trying to find my replacement, training up someone to take my job, essentially.
You just outgrew it? You were like, you need to go on to the next step?
It was, I mean, I have a lot of, I'm a man of faith, and for me it was kind of a spiritual thing. I just sensed in my spirituality, I sensed that I was supposed to move on, and I didn't know what that looked like or even where to. Because I was so happy. I was like, this job is so easy. It would be crazy for me to move on. Like, I'm making pretty good money at that time. And I've kind of worked on all the kinks that made the job hard. I got those easy. And
that was the most frustrating part of every restaurant I left. As in management, you spend all this time there, invest it in the culture, in the people. And if you're really good at it, by the time you're leaving, you've solved so many of the problems. Yeah. That's like a bummer. You have to go start somewhere else now.
I mean, it was everything from building a inventory system with the proper shelving and storage to hiring up good people to creating systems that just made the job easier and easier. I mean, just a small transition from faxing in my order ahead of time instead of going to the store and shopping for it.
Right.
Like those kinds of things just add up and make your life so much easier as a manager. Anyway, so I kind of transitioned into this sort of venturing out on my own without really sure what was going on. And I came into contact with different investor types that wanted to open coffee shops and needed help because they were more interested in the business side of coffee than actually running it or owning it. And they just wanted it to help them make money. And so I got the opportunity to consult in a few unique projects and help a few coffee shops that were struggling. And help them turn around, and some I helped more than others. My part was bigger in some than others. After a while, I realized, you know what? I think I would enjoy this more if I was building these coffee shops for me instead of just for an investor.
Right.
Spend 3-4 months getting something started and then just kind of walking away from it because it's not mine. And
right, exactly. And it's like you want the ownership of it sort of financially and all that, but you also just want it to be yours. You don't want competing decision making going on.
Right.
I mean, that's something that now more than anything else I crave. Owning my own business is the most freeing thing, is knowing at the end of the day I make a decision and my wife validates it. But I sort of, I'm pretty close to independent.
Yeah. I think I've worked pretty well in teams. It's just important that the teams have the same goal. Mm-hmm. So there was another coffee shop called Society Coffee that I helped start. And I originally just was a consultant for their first location, and then was asked to come back and help them open more. And so I was like, man, if I'm going to do more, I need to be a part owner. And it kind of became apparent pretty quickly. We never actually signed the paperwork to be an owner, for me to be an owner. So even though I kind of started working on the project and helped them open another location. But I realized, and we parted very amicably because we just had a conversation. I mean, in any close relationship, you'll have times where things can get a little heated, but we had a couple of hard conversations and then a couple of really good ones where we just realized, you have a different goal, and I'm trying to build community first and foremost, and you're just looking at another line item for your profit loss statement. Anyway, so I went and started thinking about, well, what's next? And what ended up being next was Inclusion Coffee. I started thinking a lot about the name. And that was a hard process because I really liked the name Society Coffee that we came up with for that other guy. And by the way, I didn't do any of this alone. I had help and partners and friends, people that I knew from other projects that I would kind of bring along, or they would bring me along depending on what they were doing.
Right.
But I really liked that name, Society Coffee. I was like, man, I've already used up the name that I really like.
Society Coffee too.
Yeah, so I wanted a name that just felt inclusive. And I remember saying that. I just really wanted a name that's like inclusive so that when anybody walks through the door, I mean, of course, it's a given that, anybody can come. Like, you don't name yourself like, we're not racist. That's not something you're proud about. That's a given. It's a given. You shouldn't be proud of that. That should be like
freshly ground beans, and anyone can come in. No, we're not super racist here.
Yeah. And so I was like, I wanted a name that isn't saying that, but a name that's saying you're celebrated. No matter who you are, we're celebrating your uniqueness, who you are, your background, where you come from, and just what you bring to this world. And so I was just saying, basically just describing to some friends, I want a name that's super inclusive. And one of them was like, why don't you just call it that? Mm-hmm. And I was like, Inclusive Coffee. I didn't really like the ring, the sound of that. I love the meaning of just the ring.
Coffee, yeah.
And so I played with it. It was like Inclusion Coffee. I don't mind that. And but then once again, I was like, that's kind of like saying not racist coffee, like in a way. And I was like, that's just it's too self-serving to put that on the door. It's too like it should just go without saying. So I don't feel like I can put that as my name. And so one day I was taking a shower, and I told you I'm a man of faith. I was praying about it. And I just, as I was praying, I felt like God just say this to me. Sometimes the things that should go without saying need to be said the most.
Right.
And the best analogy I have for that is, it should go without saying that you love your kids, but they need to hear it every day, in one way or another. If not through your words, through your
verbally,
actions,
physically, whatever.
Yeah, and the same thing goes for Inclusion Coffee. Or as a society, we need to be exhibiting that. It should go without saying, so therefore it should be a part of our everyday life. And so that's what kind of gave me the peace to actually call it that. And it's been really well received. People from all walks of life have just said, hey, thank you for putting that on as your name, and for being about that. And so anyway, it's really helped as far as just kind of make it really clear to people, even before they walk in the door, like, this is important to us. Not just to put it on the name as like not racist, but because we actually care about helping to promote a society in which people really hear one another and really see one another through all of the differences. And I think we actually put this on our website. We're trying to promote people being as accepting as they are different, and I don't think there's a single person that you can't apply that to.
Right.
So what does that have to do with coffee? Well,
exactly.
The beautiful thing about coffee is it's so interesting. Just about any culture about has some sort of ritual around coffee, some sort of it's a meeting, it's a drink you imbibe while meeting together. It's a meeting place all over the world, and there's so many different unique ways of making it, and every culture has their way of doing it. It's just such a pervasive thing in the world, and so in a good way, and it just helps promote community. It's a
natural lubricant to community.
Yeah, and we sell coffee, and it's what I know the most about. I used to be a roaster for a long time as well at Buongiorno, and I just love the product, and but more so I love the community. Like, to me, coffee is really the secondary goal. Community is the primary goal, and what I enjoy the most. It's the thing that, if it was just just having a product to sell for people to drink. You know, what makes coffee different than soda? Selling soda. You know, it's just different because of the culture that kind of gathers around that product. Right. And so that's what really gives me the passion to want to go through all the hardships that go through opening a business, especially brick and mortar, that we went through, especially like with COVID and construction and a lot of different new things.
Yeah. So tell me about that. So when did you start planning inclusion?
Let's see.
Like you're picking out a space, you're really committing to it.
I was looking for the next project, and as I was coming out of this other project, I had a few contacts. The Society Coffee one I told you about. I had a few contacts who were realtors were saying, "Hey, really love what you did with that coffee shop. What do you think about opening one here?" You know, realtor types, and I was looking into it and was basically saying, "Hey, look, I can do these projects, but I don't have a lot of capital, and I can get investment. I can work on that, but I'm looking for a low capital kind of project." And so I found a few that were some realtors that were willing to give me a pretty good deal, even giving me the TI up front. TI is the tenant allowance. It's what landlords will pay owners to open the construction costs for opening a business in their locations, because you're making improvements to the space, and so raising their property value.
Right.
So oftentimes they will negotiate a certain amount, usually represented as a square footage amount, like $35 a square foot. Or I mean, I've seen them. I had one deal they were offering over $100 per square foot, and sometimes they don't offer much. It just depends on the space. And so I had one all worked out. Like we had gone back and forth. It was going to be in Garland. It's a very small space.
Oh, wow.
I really liked the setup, the infrastructure that was already in the space. It had everything I needed to do what I wanted to do, minus, you know, a few pieces of equipment and, you know, a facelift with decorating and whatnot. But and then somebody was like, "Well, have you looked at this spot over here by UTA?" And I looked at it and I was like, "Oh wow, this, you know, if you've never been to our coffee shop, it's like 7,000 square feet."
Yeah.
And I looked at it, I was like, "Wow, this is huge."
It looks irresponsible.
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know, I'll just ask. I'll see what's going on. So I called them, and they were like, "It's awesome that you called us because we are like actively looking for a coffee shop specifically. Like we are reserving. We are not going to lease to anyone else but a coffee shop. They were making sure that we have a coffee shop." And at the time, it was easy for them to say that because nothing was leased at the time. I think maybe a frost bank was leased, but they hadn't started construction yet. And so I started negotiation with them. They really looked into me. They were serious about me. I gave them a really detailed business plan. I had gotten investors ready to go. I had three investors who had verbally, well, at the time I had two investors that had verbally said, "I want whatever you're doing, I want to do it. I want to help. I want to invest." But I hadn't really gotten too detailed in terms. I don't like to get too detailed in terms with investors until I'm more detailed in the specific to the space.
Right,
that
that's a huge,
so yeah. And like for instance, the difference between that Garland location and the Inclusion Coffee location in capital that I would have needed was like a difference of $300,000.
Right.
So I worked out the deal. I had a contract, and this is a little bit of a tip for anyone who's looking to open a brick and mortar, especially if it's a new building that doesn't have its certificate of occupancy. You can pretty much always get the landlord. The landlord will pretty much always give you some sort of a TI, a tenant allowance. And the hard part about that is they're going to pay you a certain amount, but not until after you open, not until after you've spent all that money.
You need someone to float the cash.
Yeah, you need somebody to float the cash. But these big buildings who are funding these millions and millions of dollar projects, they're good for it. As long as you hold up your end and it's pretty clear terms of what holding up your ends looks like. So for an investor, I just need somebody to float the cash during this 3, 6 month, a year, depending on what the scope of your construction is, while we build, and then this amount
you get it back,
set in stone, we get back. And so that enables you to negotiate much better terms if your aim is to have control of the company and a higher
it's
percentage.
much more safe for an investor.
But in order to kind of work a deal out like that, you sort of have to be building each part of the agreements sort of at the same time. Where each side is kind of wanting confirmations, and you're sort of juggling them, bouncing back and forth, and letting delays look more like, well, we're just working out the terms, or we're doing this, and you don't want to lie to them, but you can strategically tell the truth. So I had people that were interested, but one of them was just somebody I ran into at a coffee shop. It's like, oh, you're doing it? I've always wanted to open one. Well, let me know. I might be interested in investing. Like, that's all I had for one of them. And it's somebody I'd run into a bunch of times, but someone says that, how real is
right,
that?
exactly. Or what do they mean by investment?
Yeah,
and then $5,000, dude.
Right. And I had another guy that I'd worked with him. He actually had hired me quite a bit on consulting projects, and I knew that he was a little bit more legit and had actually talked about amounts and whatnot. And so that's the sort of bare bones description of how so we're drinking some beer here as we talk.
We're both gonna be burpy.
Yeah, and so little burps are gonna come along the way. It's just one of the things that happen. Anyway,
we'll have to do wine next time or something.
So that's kind of how I got the fun side of it. And like I said, the landlords did look into me. I had to give them references from all my past projects, very detailed business plan, everything from the construction cost, which, by the way, it was my first time to do a construction from a. I've done several projects, but not from a complete shell. What's called a shell space. No plumbing, no electric, no HVAC,
jackhammering concrete, everything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'd never done that, so I did underestimate. And then we also added building a mezzanine on top of everything that I was planning to do at the time, which that was really what cost the most.
But it's arguably probably one of the best things you did in that space.
It almost made me fail before I began, but it might be the thing that really makes us stand out and succeed. And I think you hear stories about different businesses that start. Anything from, your Elon Musk types to people like me who are just doing a little coffee shop. And you'll hear stories about how they almost failed.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
Multiple times.
Yeah. Elon Musk has a great story about how when he started Tesla and SpaceX, that he took all of his profits from, I think it was
PayPal.
Thank you. All of his profits and to put it towards building these or opening these or starting them, and then had to borrow money for rent. That's a funny little quip that he has, and I think it's true, or else he wouldn't say it. I mean, at least in an ideal world.
Right.
But anyway, and we really got close a few times to feeling like, man, how are we going to do this? Everything from contractors who agreed in a contract to build something, and then we paid them a down payment, and then they just left, stole the money, never showed up. And quite a lot of money.
And then you find out how difficult it is to win that money back in a civil case.
Oh, I mean, it was kind of one of those situations where we kind of determined after looking into it, and we even filed a police report, that it's pretty much we have the option of putting him in jail and not getting our money back, or not putting him in jail and not getting our money back. Was because he didn't have it. The reason he didn't have the money, and this was pretty easy to see, was because he spent it all on another project that went sideways. And so there were several situations like that. And so we just had to roll up our sleeves. Like when the steel erector didn't show up to erect the steel, we became steel erectors. And there's nothing, I tell people this all the time, like, you want to open a coffee shop? Well, just know that most of what you're going to be doing for a long time is anything but making coffee.
Right.
Or
stuff you've probably never done before.
Yeah, absolutely. But I learned a lot, and really went through it. And I actually just said this earlier today to someone who was asking me about a business idea that they had, and I said, look, man, the first thing you got to do is decide that you're going to do this. You can't be on the fence about it. You have to decide, and then from there, it's whatever it takes. But if you're kind of halfway on the fence, then I can tell you right now, you're going to fail. Mm-hmm. Or not necessarily you're going to fail, you're going to give up. You're going to decide that the cost is too great.
Yeah, you're not going to have your foot all the way on the gas.
Yeah, and no one's going to want to help
that.
you.
Yeah, right. Investors aren't going to want to partner with somebody who's like, yeah, I might sort of do it
if I'm still thinking about it,
Seems cool.
And so it's kind of, you just got to really put a lot of thought into the decision, but at a certain point, it's decided, and you're just going to do it.
So where in the process did pandemic hit? Like,
Okay.
yeah, where were you?
So construction took about 9 months from the point that we got access to start. And at about month 8 was when COVID really kind of amped up. So much so that the final few inspections were a little bit harder to get organized because the city started shutting down. And we got it. They got us taken care of. And then on day 1, we weren't even allowed to let people sit down. Like they could come in, get their coffee, and leave. That's all they were allowed to do. And so many people had been waiting for us to open that we actually had a really great first day. But then day 2 was, pretty terrible.
And then you're walking into this warehouse that's half furnished.
Yeah.
Walk up to get coffee from a little girl.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was hard. I mean, and another big thing that happened, which truth be told, we're still dealing with this, is the AC broke on the first day. Like the first time we tried to turn it on, it was actually hot enough to need. It didn't work. And we had already paid the guy because it was cold when he finished his part. And so it's kind of hard to tell if the AC is working, when it's cold. And and it took him a month to get out there to try to fix it. And we realized the reason why it was messed up in the first place because he was incompetent and couldn't fix it and couldn't figure out, well, I don't know if he couldn't or just decided I'm not going to fix it because it's too much. And to this day, we spent probably a little over $10,000 in getting the AC fixed from all the problems from the original install.
And it's a big space with a lot of windows.
Yes, big space with a lot of windows. And our customers, man, yourself included, are awesome, very understanding. And I'm amazed at how many people still come and hang out.
Yeah, that's true. I've never once seen someone like go up to a barista and be like, "What's going on in here?"
Right.
But you'll see that in a Starbucks all the time. Yeah. You never see that in your coffee shop.
Yeah, I joke with my my employees. I say, so something you got to realize when you work in coffee, everyone you're encountering is before they've had their morning coffee. So sometimes you're gonna start out with some people that are a little cranky, as we all can be before we've really woken up. Mm-hmm. And it's more of a joke. Everybody's really pretty great because, to be honest, like you're the one who gives me my coffee, so it's like there's like almost a revered state. Your barista's a little
drug dealery too.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, and getting your fix from your barista, But we have really great people that come and they're patient and with that. And I made a little joke about it. I wrote it up on our little covering that helps protect against COVID. I put something like, we apologize for the heat. The saga of the broken AC continues. Will the baristas prevail? Tune in live to find out. And people laugh at that and feel sorry for us. So instead of people getting mad at us for the AC not being fixed, they're feeling sorry for us and laughing at it, at the way we're handling it. And
yeah, I definitely feel like people treat your establishment how you'd want them to treat it. It's community for sure. You don't really get the feeling that people are really customers in there even. Mm-hmm. So we're running low on time. You've given us a lot of your story. I
got 2 questions, actually.
Okay,
because I've been listening to this conversation, and it's pretty incredible. So I got these 2 questions for you, Josh. Mm-hmm. I'll go with the first one here. What is your number 1 tip for a coffee roaster who wants to start their own brick and mortar coffee shop? What's like the most important tip that you would give to a coffee roaster ready to do their own thing?
So this is actually something I didn't do well that I'm endeavoring to do well now, and that's build a team. Don't try to do it all yourself. Get a team around you. But make sure, if you're the driving force to why this is happening, make sure that you have control. Because you need to be able to, if it's your business, be able to actuate what you envision, but have enough humility to know what's not really your wheelhouse. You really need to trust people with different talents. And I think that's really important. I know that I say I didn't really have a team. I did have a team in a way, but it was very informal. Like my wife, for instance, I was all the time running things by her. She has very different talents than me. She's extremely organized, extremely efficient, and I'm very, creative all over the place. I'm thinking about steps 10 and 11, whenever, we're at steps 2 and 3, that's the way I am. My dad was a huge help. My brother, different friends. So just really the humility to ask questions and not feel like you have to look like the guy who knows the most in the room. Mm-hmm. You're really just the one with the passion to make it happen. You don't have to be the one who knows everything.
Something of a vision.
Yeah, that's awesome. Last question I had for you was, COVID obviously took a hit on a lot of businesses, especially brick and mortar. What was something, what was the biggest thing you learned out of COVID and getting out of it? Now we're moving forward. What's something that you're sort of applying from the lessons you learned from this crazy 2020 that we all had?
So this year, it wasn't just COVID. There was a lot that went on.
There's a lot. The big freeze.
We had the big freeze. We had COVID. There was a lot of protests going on. We had protests right outside. I remember one day.
I guess being by UTA, right?
Yeah, being by UTA. We had
right on Abrams. Yeah.
Wow.
We had an employee that couldn't even leave. He was time for him to go home. He couldn't even leave because the streets were crowded. And we weren't upset about that, but it's just a lot of things going on. We were very much supportive. That's great. Here's a bunch of free waters and lemonades. But it really. So I'm mentioning all these hardships so the thing I've learned, and I feel like I'm still learning and was learning before all of this happened, that at the end of the day, these kinds of hardships are really something that we all are going through. And any hardship that you feel like you're experiencing, just remember that someone else is experiencing that hardship of some kind or another, if not the same one. Mm-hmm. And the thing that is universal may not be which hardship, but it is the fact that life is full of hardships. And something I learned through all of this is that we're tempted to want to kind of blame game and look at the problem, when I think the best thing we can do is come together and look for a solution as a society. And sometimes you have to think about other people's problems before yourself, and vice versa, for us to actually accomplish that. And that's a big part of, there's so many reasons why I love the name inclusion and what it means to me. That's a big part of it, is kind of just encouraging people to see one another and just put your preconceived notions of what that person is aside. Just because they look like somebody that did something to you, that's silly. This is a different person. And just hear people and listen. And a great question to ask yourself that I'm learning to ask is, anytime you see, even if it's a stranger that you're not talking to, let's say a good example, we have a lot of homeless people that hang out at the coffee shop, and sometimes they're not all together there mentally because of who knows what. A great question to ask yourself in regard to people you don't understand is, what's their story? Mm-hmm. I wonder how they got there. Nobody's just born a racist. Nobody's just born. They got there through something. And if you can ask what's their story, then you're sort of posturing towards that person in your mind and in your heart is more of, I want to hear about them, and that makes you see them and listen to them before you're just judging them, before even speaking a word. Even just the question, even if it's never going to be answered, it's a realization that they got that way because of a history that they have that I don't know about. And so it kind of tempers that judgment, and it doesn't mean that you just don't, doesn't mean you ignore the things that people do. Right. And, you got to protect yourself and your friends and family, but it does mean that you sort of kind of soften the way you approach situations and people. And, that was one thing we said about COVID. We get people that are upset about us being too stringent with our COVID, precautions. Some people that are upset that we're not doing enough. And I don't know their story and why they feel what they feel. So I just thank them like, sure. Hey, thank you for your feedback.
Great advice.
And we're really going to look at that. And thank you for being a part of because you brought that to me. Now you're a part of the solution by helping us figure it out. And just that, asking yourself, what's your story? And taking that to heart.
Perfect.
Well, that was a mic drop.
Yeah.
That was a great way to...
Well, Josh, thank you. You'll be back again for sure. I feel like that was crazy fast.
Really? Even though I was 30 minutes late?
That was a 40-minute long
wow.
podcast. That's the longest one we've done.
Wow.
Yeah, it flew by. It was a beautiful, engaging conversation. That was awesome. I learned so much about coffee and coffee shops and life too. So yeah, awesome.
Well, thanks, Josh. We'll have
Absolutely.
you back.
Yeah, sounds good.
Mushy mushy. All right.